from a fire hose. Never a dull moment, but yes, you'll hear the stories you won't hear anywhere else, and we appreciate you being here with us for them today. I'm Justin Barclay. Welcome in a conversation that is long overdue. And it's one that I think you're going to find to be maybe one of the most critical that we'll have this year. And it's all about the data centers. I've been hearing the stories. They want to put one in almost like in every neighborhood now. Like, it doesn't matter. All throughout the state, we're hearing stories about where people want to put these in. And of course, it's not just here in Michigan. It's happening all throughout the country right now, but particularly the Midwest and in places where there are lots of farmland. So the question is, what do you need to know about them? People have concerns. It's very similar to what we've seen with Goshen and that CCP-linked battery plant they tried to put in Mecosta County and the fight that they've had there. In fact, that thing's still ongoing, the latest with the lawsuit. But you had people stepping up basically on the left and the right saying, I'm concerned, and for various different reasons. The right, it was national security concerns. There were concerns about stewardship with certain parts of the farmland. And most importantly, it was really the overall, hey, we didn't get a say in this, and our township just did this. There were NDAs signed in back rooms. The left said, we don't like the way this is working with the environment. We've got questions about it as well. And so you had coalitions, people stepping up, joining hands together to fight this fight. And I think that's what we're starting to see now with the fight in the battery centers. Welcome into the program. Talk a little bit about this. I call them double trouble. The dynamic duo. We've got Kristen, Meghan, Kelly, and Tammy Clark, and both joining together on the first time on this program. I guess it was 22, maybe. Was it 21, 22 when we all first met? And here we are at it again.
I think I met Kristen in 2020 during the lockdowns, listening to her on your program. And I reached out and I said, oh my gosh, there's another one of me saying the same things that I'm saying. And that's how we met. So it's been a long journey.
Yeah. But every time we talk to you, whether it's together or alone, it's like talking very casually and with a friend because, you're just so easy to talk to, Justin.
That's incredible. Well, I appreciate it. You guys too. I really like, the fight that you've been in there together. You've been such great partners with each other, but also with the rest of us who are just want to see, obviously truth, logic, and common sense prevail in these situations. And we really like that mug you got there. Kristen's got the Justin mug. Right.
We're representing.
On full display. I love it. So I'm going to give people a chance. We got folks watching right now on the behind the scenes live stream over on Locals. We'll have VIPs in the stream there right now. And I just checked this. So you guys can ask questions if you've got them, you want to drop them in there, or you want maybe some ideas on the way to go. Because there are people fighting. I get calls every day, and I know you guys do too. But hey, what do I do? They want to put one of these in near us, and how do we fight this? And what do I do? And so part of it is going to be, we're going to talk about those approaches and the things that are working. We're going to start with the concerns, because I think it's important for us to understand what we're getting into here. And that being said, I also, when we come to the tail end of this, want to really sort of talk about solutions, because I'll just tell you my honest approach on this is, look, President Trump has made a big push. He believes, and I tend to agree that, look, if we're going to compete against China in this AI race, we better compete to win, because it is serious. If somebody like China or Russia or somebody is able to get ahead of this technology, the things that they can do, because I believe it's just like anything else, firearms or anything else. It's about who controls that and utilizes the intent behind the utilization of that technology. That is important. And so I say, look, I don't want data center in my backyard, but I don't want a coal plant in my backyard, and I don't want windmills in my backyard, and I don't want solar in my backyard, and I don't want nuclear in my backyard, and I don't want, all of these things. But eventually, at some point, something has to be in somebody's backyard. The question is, Are you involved in that process? So if people get together and they decide they want one of these things in their backyard, more power to them. But that conversation needs to be transparent. We've got to make sure that everybody's involved and they know exactly what they're getting into. And that informed piece, informed consent. Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I was just thinking that you've heard that term before.
Yeah,
it sure comes full circle.
It really is incredible. So let's start with that and tell us what the concerns are.
Well, let's first of all, before we get into the concerns, we both have a couple different of angles and approach and experience in this profession of being environmental health specialists. And we have a little bit of different backgrounds, even though our professions overlap a lot. But I first want to start, I think we need to lay the foundation that you are absolutely right that we need to win this AI race. So Kristen and I are not anti-AI. We are not anti-technology. We are not trying to slow growth or innovation or anything like that. In fact, we both very much want to see President Trump and his administration succeed. We know we need to win this AI race, right? We cannot have China beat us because we'll all be in very big trouble. And a lot of people say they've already beat us. No, they haven't. Everything they're doing is a copycat from us. They are not ahead of us in this race. So let's just be clear about that. We need to stay ahead in the technology game. So that's the conversation that we're having, because as much as honestly, I personally would love to go back to the days of Mayberry, it's just not going to happen. So I really don't even like to waste my conversation, my time and my energy on, just venting about how people hate AI and all that. I mean, I totally get it, but it's here to stay. We're not going to put it back in the box. We are not going to put the lid on it. So that's why this is happening. So when Kristen and I talk about all of that, it's important for people to understand this is where we are today. So what can we do to make sure we succeed and we win and we help President Trump and this administration in this game? So I just think it's important to, establish that as we move forward, because the messaging is very important. If we are going to win this, our message cannot be no data centers, no data centers. That cannot be the message. That's a losing message. Okay, so what we need to say is no data centers in our communities. So that's a different approach. And that's actually a winnable thing. And we'll talk about solutions towards the end. But, maybe Kristen can start getting into some of the concerns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before we dive into this, obviously, I think your viewers have watched this enough to know what we do. But I've done my job for a very large electrical utility company. So I actually know about MISO, FERC, NERC, all of these committees, these organizations and regulations. And I have done extensive training on understanding the load bearing, how grids work, things I literally can't even talk about. You have to understand that when you're assessing putting in an AI data center, you first have to go think about home construction. If you want to, you lived in your house for, 50 years and you want to put on an addition. Well, can you handle it? You're not going to put a chandelier in a condemned house. You're not going to put an addition on a house that has crumbling foundation and mold and termites. So when you think about the grid, I don't even care what consumers or DTE tells you. You don't have to work for them. I've worked in the industry and I know what the role of MISO and these other committees are designed to do is take a 10,000 foot view and say, it's not what's just happening in the community. We're attached to other areas and other states. So if we're hogging the power here, it's going to disrupt people elsewhere. So you can consent to it here, but the people down the line are not consenting to it. So when we say that we're not a fan of all of these data centers in Michigan, outside of the health and safety aspects and the human and environmental impacts, we do not have the capability, especially with the increase of the push for electric vehicles and that load. And the issue is, you will hear DTE or consumers rally for this and say, we'll just put in more substations. It doesn't matter. The infrastructure.
So
yes.
And I don't want to interrupt you, but this is specifically, this portion is, do we have the infrastructure? Can the grid handle it?
No.
Is what you're saying. And it turns out may not be able to handle it. Why is that?
That is because of our failing. So the grid You just think about how many communities like Flint, you have degrading pipes under, and you've got things leaching into the water. We have such failing infrastructure in Michigan. And by the way, that's like, other than the government, it's the main reason people are leaving.
Yeah.
Businesses are leaving because our infrastructure, you can put paint over, mold, the mold's still there. So you have to remediate. And it's such an overhaul that slowly we have to fix the substations, the underground lines. There's so much involved. Plus, with our very unpredictable weather, especially with what we've been dealing with now. I mean, I had a pipe burst by my house. It's very hard on these. And then the thing is, a lot of these have lead splicing. Um, there's so much involved, and there's even human and environmental impacts from upgrading that infrastructure. So you hear people say, why don't we just use an abandoned building? Again, that type of abandoned building doesn't have it has degraded lines. It's putting the cart before the horse. And
That's one of the questions I've heard people say is, we got a lot of this industrial space in like places like Detroit, and it's just completely, why don't we put it there? And what you're saying is it may take more. It's a possibility, it's a solution, but it may take more money to clean up those places to get them ready than it would to put it in a piece of farmland that's never had anything on it except for corn.
Or a Superfund site, a site that's not going to ruin anyone's community or have eminent domain. There are lots of areas around the country that are not meant for human occupancy because of other environmental issues.
Yeah.
Put it there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we started calling for as solutions. But I think it's important that we understand, even if you put it in a brownfield, a Superfund type of site where there's not a community, it would be a standalone, not as seriously or negatively impacting human or environmental health. But there's a caveat to that. This means we would also have to put the full responsibility on the company. These are billion-dollar companies that can afford to clean up or remediate the contaminated soils from a brownfield or a Superfund site. They can afford to develop and build their own infrastructure. They can afford to develop their own technologies. But the reason that they're not doing it and that they're coming after farmlands that are right on the edge or bordering a small town or developed community township is because the Michigan legislature, let's make no mistake about this, has handed them the keys to the state of Michigan and our farmlands and our waterways. They did this by tax subsidies and corporate welfare, inviting them in. So now there's this mad rush because they don't have to put the money into developing the infrastructure, cleaning up or remediating areas that would be more suited for facilities like this. So we have to understand they did this in the name of, the green energy push. Yeah. Governor Whitmer's Green New Deal. So they all signed this. They all went along with this. And now basically the whole state of Michigan and our environment, our communities are wide open to them. So these developers are just rushing in fast and furious. And that's where Kristen and I saw this. And we both just went, whoa, what are we doing here? This is not okay. They don't understand because they have not done the environmental impact studies that are legally required. They've not done those things. And so they're not disclosing, and many of them I don't even think realize the very serious negative human and environmental impacts placing these data centers or battery centers, like you mentioned, Goshen. They kind of all fall under that same umbrella. Anything that's going to generate a lot of heat, use a lot of water, it's going to have some of the same very similar negative impacts. So those types of facilities need to be looked at very carefully, and we need to be very intentional about where we place them in order to, reverse or I guess control the negative impacts as much as possible.
So this is, I think it's a good point. Is what we talked previously, just to kind of get the lay of the land on some of these things. And, some of the point that you made is that, some of these folks, these politicians, really most of them, they don't really know. They don't have, and it's like with us, we don't know. We're just trying to figure it out. We're trying to get to, but what they've done is they've essentially, without having all the information, just said, yeah, this would be good for the state. And they've kind of signed off on it. It's not necessarily that they're evil or that they had ill intent at all. It's just that this was the direction things were going. Now, that's important because when we have these conversations, and we will need to have conversations with a number of people, but particularly with those folks in legislature, we've got to come with an approach if you want to be effective here of not beating them up. They're constantly getting beat up, and some of them should be in some ways, verbally anyways, what I'm saying. But they should hear from us. But in this case, it really needs to be from the standpoint of, hey, we're just trying to educate you to let you know. Did you know that this was the case here? Or did you know? And a lot of them probably aren't. In fact, I hear a lot of them still mentioning things that I wasn't aware of until just recently, that I think are critical. So let's shift to another piece, because this brings us into something that I actually was just thinking and talking about, was the water here in Michigan and the data centers, the amount of water they use. And I'd heard things like, well, you just close system and, the water will be fine, and then we're not going to have any. So why does stories like that end up having a different outcome? Apparently, there is a reason why they want to be here in the Great Lakes state with all the access to the water that we have.
You're exactly right. And that's a benefactor claim. I've heard claims that it's a closed loop system and it's no different than just, a certain amount of swimming pool water usage. Well, the irony of that is I have a swimming pool, and not only do I have to refill it after every season, but it evaporates. So then I have to continue to refill it. And my pool's only 22,000 gallons, and it's only open for 4 months out of the year. So the issue is they can claim it uses minimal water. That is completely false. The issue is it uses a lot of water. It uses millions of gallons, and it constantly has to replenish itself. And I'll have Tammy elaborate into the process. But when you're doing that with that closed loop system, you're dealing with more human environmental impacts because of what that evaporative cooling does to those lines.
Yeah. And, the problem is this water. So these things are very, very thirsty. Now, Kristen and I have talked about the fact that there are technologies out there that can be used. They're very expensive, but they can be used to avoid this, massive water usage. But they don't want to do that because they have been given access to our fresh water. So why would they spend the money on these technologies if they don't have to, right? So it's our job to come in and go, whoa, time out. This is not okay. We need to, I like Tom Leonard's proposed moratorium here. He's got the petition out for a 1-year moratorium on all these data centers, because we need to slow our roll, and we need to look at putting the requirement on these companies to intentionally develop, pay for, and sustain their own usage, their own, services and energy usage and cooling processes, not just, drinking up the Great Lakes until they're dry. And that's what's going to happen in our aquifers. So a lot of our legislative friends are getting very false information. It's very misleading. But they're not the experts. So when they go and they talk to somebody from Microsoft or Oracle or Meta, of course those representatives are going to sell them their product, and they're going to spin it in a way that it sounds so real, right? And this is exactly what happened to us over COVID. We were all told by the so-called experts that just putting a mask on is the best thing you can do to prevent the spread. Well, everybody in the public just believed it because these doctors, they're doctors, they sound so knowledgeable. And of course, and so, this is like COVID 2.0. Our legislators and, the people out there involved, I think even some of these developers don't even really realize that what they're being told is not accurate. So as this water is being used, by the way, there is no such thing truly as a closed loop system. There's no true closed loop system. So that's very misleading. Okay. So from the get-go. But no matter what type of a cooling system you have, unless it's one of these geothermal or, the glycol systems that don't use all the water, this water is going to be contaminated and picking up anti-corrosives, anti-scaling agents. Lots of different nitrates are going to be concentrated, which, as Kristen has pointed out before, in Michigan, excuse me, our water is already very contaminated with nitrates, our soils.
And it's carcinogenic. So
yeah. So then what happens to this water once it goes through these systems and it gets very contaminated, and the blowdown goes back into the aquifers? Well, as we have said, where do you draw your well water from?
That's what
Your
we're doing.
aquifers. That's
Yeah,
what you're drinking.
yeah.
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 So, and even, and Kristen can explain, even
That's what you're swimming in, at the lake with
in
your
the
kid.
lakes, the
Yeah.
rivers. That's right. The ponds. Michigan is, so water centric. And that all comes from our aquifers, our rivers, and our fresh lakes. And we, are responsible for 20% of the world's fresh water in Michigan. So we have to be very guarded, and we have to be very responsible here in what we're doing and how. And Kristen can even explain how, our water treatment plants, even if it's dumped into the water treatment facility, not just blown down into a river, they're not even equipped to handle what's coming at them. And so we need to be very honest with legislators and people making these decisions. And they need to understand, you need to be talking to experts like us, not just believing what you're being sold, right? For some campaign funding promises, because that's what's happening here. But water treatment facilities, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So our water treatment facilities here in Michigan, I am familiar with, and actually across the country. The issue is, you've heard claims of don't flush your meds. And the reason you can't flush your meds is because they don't have the updated filter media to get rid of them, all of the meds that people flush. Even just when they're de-icing planes at the airport, that water runoff, again, overloads the system. So as you're introducing more and more higher concentrations of different toxicants that are not used to being in certain areas of water treatment facilities, because, they're all around the state, they can't keep up with that. And then who do you think is now drinking that? I mean, I think everyone should have a water filter on their home anyway. But again, it's a trickle effect of how many different industries it impacts. And it's not just electrical. Again, it's environmental. And then you go into the flora, fauna, the animal life. There's so many issues. And I think when you go into the human and environmental impacts, we'll probably touch into this further. We are testifying actually February 4th at the Capitol. We had to reschedule because we were snowed in. But you have to understand the reproductive health hazards from the EMF, from the noise pollution. And I know when people hear about light pollution, they just think it's a nuisance. No, it's not. It actually impedes your health. I have to do illumination surveys because of what it can do to your brain, and the stress and the headaches and the vestibular migraines. It's not just, it's, like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, The Neighbors. It's not just an annoyance. There are actually impacts on humans from light pollution.
Yeah.
And the noise pollution. Kristen and I, in our professions, we have to very closely monitor decibel levels with calibrated instruments. And once they get above 65, 85 is actionable. But between that 65 and 85, we have to watch it very closely, because once you hit 65 decibels of noise for an extended period of time, it causes inflammation in the brain. It doesn't just cause hearing loss. It actually causes, like Kristen said, with light pollution, negative human health impacts. But the problem with some of these data centers, most of them that are being proposed, is that the noise that they are going to be creating, this constant hum, it's at a 65 to 85 decibel range. You can't turn it off. You can't get away from it. And so it's going to cause inflammation in the brain of people living in nearby areas, and our animals, our livestock. It's negatively affecting birds and bees, which we're already seeing insects, bees, and bird populations severely decreasing because of these 5G towers going up everywhere. So this is a real concern. And these are things that people don't understand the details here involved until it's too late. And now we're hearing from communities that are, they have these hyperscale data centers built in Ohio and Georgia. They're having real serious problems, and they're having to move and relocate. Then the problem is they've lost all their property value. Nobody will buy their home, and they're walking away from their beautiful homes. And so this is a real serious problem that we have got to tackle and stop the process in which we're doing this.
Right now.
Yeah. So, and that's why we reiterate, we're not anti these data centers, but, another thing to look at is, what is the rush? You know what I'm saying? Like, Microsoft is kind of taking the lead on this.
Well, they don't want to be first. I mean, I understand why, you want to be first. The first is the winner, right? There's Clark. But but like, I get that. But at the same time, I do think there's a lot of this. It's pretty reasonable to say there's a lot of this that maybe we haven't really walked through all the way.
Right.
And
Yes.
and so that brings us really to that next piece, or that piece of how do we do, let's say we want to do this. Say we all agree that it's reasonable that this is the next big like nuclear arms race, and we don't want China or Russia. We do know China's ripping off everything. They don't really innovate. They just steal. But like, we don't want them, God forbid, to somehow get a leg up on this thing. And we do want to make sure that we are first. But how do we do that in a responsible way, where we take into consideration these things that, once the toothpaste comes out of the tube? I think there's some people that are so singular focused, and I get it. I think some of this is admirable, but at the same time, you come so singular focused that you get the tunnel vision, and it does not matter what harm may come or whatever. When they talk about the Hippocratic Oath, I think this is rare these days, unfortunately, but medically, you have to say first, do no harm. So why not take that approach? Say first, let's just make sure that yes, we're doing these things, but we do them in a responsible way. And I think that's reasonable. How do we make those things happen and say, yes, President Trump said it's important. We want to get there. We want to win, but we also want to make sure that we make and keep America great. And that includes our communities.
Well, I think this will sound familiar. So you utilize a multidisciplinary approach to implement engineering and designs that
Where
make
have
this
we
safer.
heard that term before? A multidisciplinary approach.
I will just I will tell you that I have been involved
Screaming
in
this from the rooftops during the last 5 years. I just remember everybody saying, and we did the same thing. There was a time I was saying, guys, this is like, this is obvious. This is clear. Let's be smart here. How do we take into consideration all these things? And that's how that's how we all end up meeting, is that I was curious and said, what about, how do we look into this? And, and so you're right. Multidisciplinary approach. Explain that for folks who may be hearing it for the first time.
I'll give you an example too. So when you're going to, I'll give you if you're going to build, let's say, a hospital. This actually happened in real life. I worked at a VA hospital. They were going to build a dental clinic, and they knew that they had to have chairs and, hook up the water lines for the water, the hoses. They had people making dentures and crowns using methyl methacrylate. And they were like, oh, there's going to be dust. We'll just put this like random like baking hood. Okay, well, 3 people got cancer. And this is before I got there though. I got hired on and I was like, so at what point did you infer with an industrial hygienist when you design this? Because you need capture ventilation. So it never goes. So these people were working with carcinogenic powder to make the dental appliances, and it was being sucked up the hood right through their breathing zone, right? So I had to engineer and design with another engineer, like a PVC type side and a plastic clear thing. So the workers were working underneath the hood, shaving and sanding, never going through their breathing zone. And 3 people got cancer. It could have been avoided because there was no multidisciplinary approach. Every single person that is going to touch that space or will have governance over that space or is impacted by that space needs a voice. Now, I have been involved in Bitcoin mining for many, many years. And the specific Bitcoin facility that I utilized is one that is put underground, and it uses a special cooling agent. And then the heat source that is generated is redistributed into power. It's self-sustaining.
That's interesting.
It's very similar to, Justin. I know there's a lot of different data centers being proposed.
Is it expensive? I don't mean to cut you off, Tammy, but
it's Bitcoin millionaires that made it. So yes, it's expensive, but that's how they rallied.
But is it worth it?
Yes, it's absolutely worth it.
Because it reduces and eliminates the negative human and environmental impacts. It's not using water. It's using its own cooling technologies. And this is what we've been saying. These technologies do exist, but they are pricey. But it doesn't matter. If these billion-dollar companies want to build these facilities, then it's on them to not create harm to the community and the people and the environment around them. So I was reading about the Deep Green data center, because you've heard there's a lot of them that are proposed all over the state. Some of them are large hyperscale centers. Some of them are not. They're a little smaller. The Deep Green Center that I was reading about, proposed in downtown Lansing with their Board of Light and Power, is using that glycol cooling type of system. It is in a closed loop system, but it's not using an evaporative process. It's using glycol, so it's got very minimal water usage. It's also taking the heat that's generated and it's turning that into energy for homes, for hot water for homes in the Lansing businesses and Lansing business area. So when I read about that, I thought, okay, this is what we need to do. And it's going to be very quiet. It's not going to be a real large, loud process. So when I read that, I thought, there you go. This is what we've been saying. These technologies do exist, but we've got to be careful about what type of facility, and the fact that the companies themselves need to be responsible for their own infrastructure, technologies. And then in addition, the one thing we haven't talked about is that a lot of these will be going out into space soon. And so what happens then when you have this massive campus in a community, little farm community, and then they abandon it because they're sending a lot of these data centers out into outer space or under the ocean, like China is doing with theirs. Well, then that company should be responsible in the contract language for also remediating that land and turning it back into, the proper land as if it was never there. They remediate it and restore it after they leave. So there's a lot involved.
All right, so that's interesting, because as you're saying this, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, we're going to have these data centers here forever, but you already mentioned that they're already thinking about putting them in places like space. And I'm sure at some point, if they haven't already talked about it, I'm sure the ocean will be another piece of that puzzle. But then you have all kinds of issues with that.
I was just kind of giggling because I have a mole vole problem in my backyard. So I'll take a mini one and put it underground and it will get those little suckers out of my yard. But you have to think back to just how much technology has advanced over the past 10 to 15 years. I mean, do you remember like the giant big screen TVs that were like on wheels and it was like this thick? Now we have paper thin flat screen, like 5K, 6K TVs. So it's kind of like slow your roll. And I'm the type of person, I'm an Android user, but when a new phone comes out, I actually wait it out if I'm like mid in my agreement, because I'm like, a new one's going to come out in a year later. So my point in that comparison is everyone's at a race to just hog the land and water from our state. Pause for a second, because you could be in mid build while some new technology comes out. So I also think if we can't stop it, it needs to be done in phases, because let's say we have like 2 or 3 more put in and something massive happens. Well, if there's 9 other, are we just going to wait? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's take our time. Like, the rush is the huge problem here. It's irresponsible. And I think it's also unethical to just go 100 miles an hour and doing this without doing all the due diligence with the multidisciplinary approach. And Justin, there's already information out there of where they're at and how it's dried up wells and completely took out wildlife. And there's so many stories people can look up on YouTube where people are being interviewed about this. It's very real and they're being unheard.
And that's a good way to put it. It's irresponsible and unethical. And it is 100%. So one of the things that I've been calling for to help support the President Trump administration in this initiative is to create a federal task force. We need to start with a federal task force of, people who are educated on the environmental issues, like environmental engineers, environmental health specialists like Kristen and I, and even real estate specialists who can put real estate requirements. That's a term that's used in the real estate industry. What are the requirements? If you go to look for a new home or a new commercial building space, your realtor will ask you, what are your requirements? So there needs to be specific requirements built into the target locations. We need to identify areas that these places can be built, and we need to set aside, is there already existing infrastructure that the companies can tie into? That doesn't matter. See, that's what they're doing right now. They're wanting to just tie into our local infrastructure so they don't have to spend the money on their own. And I understand they need to be close enough to be effective, but they don't need to be in your neighbor's farm. Mom and pop are selling the farm, and so we're going to plunk a data center down there. That's not appropriate. So we need to identify the human and environmental impacts and the real estate requirements that will the most negatively, or I should say, the most appropriately reduce the negative human and environmental
Right.
impacts, to control those things as much as possible. It's never going to be perfect. Okay, there's always going to be people that yell and scream about that or so absolutionists. But that's where we came at this and said, look, we're never going to put this genie back in the bottle. It's here to stay. So all we can do is our best by working with that multidisciplinary approach and experts to identify what's the best thing we can possibly do. We know it's not going to be perfect, but
Well, and if I
That's
can
a
just
start.
add to another extension of profession is we watch the targeted enforcement of the EPA. So if you
Mhm.
understood the safeguards that are in place by these large corporations that have a lot of a discharge of water, or, you know, they have PM 2.5 going through stacks, the controls that are in place and the fines that these businesses face if they don't put in proper engineering controls, and they have to like show proof of permits, proof of testing every year of the water, the soil, all this stuff. And I just feel like whether it's a battery plant or a data center, they are just given a pass, because when you look at the scale of it, what this look a little oh, and that's another thing, Justin, is they're calling them just a commercial building.
Oh, yeah.
No,
Just a little
it's
commercial
like
building.
a military base, basically. It's not a little, Costco facility or DuPont. It's massive,
Yeah.
and I think we need to understand its classification.
It's heavy duty. Folks want to ask questions, by the way. It's definitely industrial strength stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. We got people in the chat asking right now in the VIP on locals. Drop your questions in. You're gonna try and get as many answers as possible. So, and this is something we probably should have set up earlier. But data center. We hear about that in AI. But why do they want to build these data centers? Why do they need the data centers? There's a little bit that maybe some folks may understand about what it takes to. Well, first it's capturing data and what they'll do with that data, and then there's like the power or computational what it'll take to run AI itself and how that's all going to work. So there's a couple of different reasons why they're building these things, but maybe you guys could talk about that so you can understand
Yeah.
what's
So
happening.
it's because of the increased demand on the technology. It's used for radiology. Yes, a human still looks at it. AI secondary caught something when I tore a tendon in my foot. The radiologist missed. So it's used in medical operations. I use AI every day to track my macros. I know that a lot of people in our profession now are utilizing it to generate reports. Not that they can't write the reports, but it's just helping have a second eye. Like, am I interpreting this correctly? Because it can dig deeper on the web. Now AI does make mistakes, but it's not because people are becoming lazy. It's kind of like when I help my daughter with her math homework, low key, I'm like, she's never going to have to do this, because she's got a calculator. So it's being used in every facet of life. Like I said, medical, industrial, banking, cryptocurrency. It has been using. Actually, the first people to use this technology was crypto.
Yeah, and even journalists. I was, listening to a story of a journalist the other day who her boss asked her, "Did you run that through ChatGPT?" And she's like, "No, I wrote it myself." And that's a new requirement. Many workplaces now are requiring the use of AI, and they were tracking her on her computer, watching, "Did you run this through AI?" So people now are being required to use it, as like Kristen said, as a secondary set of eyes in many of their workplaces. So it's here to stay. It's something that we're all going to have to get used to. And to be very honest with you, this is what I'm telling my kids. If you don't learn how to use it in your profession, you're going to be left behind. It's just the way it is.
There are definite downsides to it, but in a more innovative way, it's the new thing. It's like, to me, it's how Wi-Fi and everything that became wireless.
It's like the new industrial revolution.
I've used it, and we use it quite a bit for production here. It helps us do things that we wouldn't have been able to do before. You need a full team to do some things that we're able to do. That's definitely helpful. Research, you got to be careful. You got to check it. You can't have it do everything for you, but quite a bit of things that it can do. And one of the things that I'm most interested in is like with health, as you just mentioned, it helped you discover something that you weren't aware of. So how many cases will we hear where it actually enhances or empowers doctors or people? It'll save lives, but it'll also be able to do things that we will we probably want to warn about as well. And speaking of which, but it is here. So what it was not like we're not going to have it. It's going to be here.
Well, I've even heard it's being tested for surgeries. I mean, they already have the Da Vinci robot.
Sure.
I don't know if I want to volunteer for that, but AI is designed. Yeah, I maybe would let it paint my nails, but that's about it. But there's, like I said, there's just so many industries, and whether or not I know some people, my best friend is like, it's the devil, but then I see her use it, and I'm like, okay. But a perfect example where I use it is, I'm writing really, really long reports, and I'm told I can come on a show, and or I have to give testimony, and I've only got 3 minutes. I will take a picture of everything I've typed up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, please make this into like 10 bullets that I can say in 3 minutes on the fly. So it's not like I didn't come up with the information. Plus, I think people are disingenuous about the use of AI. Like, you don't have autonomous thought. Like, I've totally been like, hey, help me convey this message without sounding rude, because I don't mean to come across a certain way. And it's like, use this tone. Yeah.
I've had to do that once or twice too. When I say, I don't know how to do this right now. Usually I say, Lord help me. And that works. Sometimes it gives you the tools to do it too. And so, but it's interesting. I do think there are going to be little ways that people discover how to use it on a daily basis. I've seen lots of interesting things happen recently with chat bots and things like that are actually going out and doing the work for people. So that's all coming. We're not going to be able to put that back in the tube. Hemi asked this question. He says, we have a Microsoft data center wanting to build here in Gaines Township. I'm going to attend the meeting on February 12th. What should people know when they go to these meetings? How should they be equipped and empowered? And what should they be saying, when they talk to the people in their communities, but also on these township boards, et cetera?
Well, one of the things that they need to ask, because I would tell everybody listening in Michigan, these developers and the real estate developers and these companies behind this, like Microsoft, they have been working on this and have been having conversations with your board members for over a year. This did not just pop up overnight. These are deals that have been being worked on, and farmers, we have testimony, farmers, even Tom Leonard he talked about it on your show, and he put it up on one of his pages that one of his friends who owns a farm was contacted by a developer and offered like $85,000 an acre or something like that. And they just keep reaching out, wanting more and more. So these are the specific things that developers are looking for. They're reaching out. And when people go to their community meetings, their township meetings, their city council meetings, they need to be asking the questions: what backroom deals have been made, if any? What do you know about these data centers? How long have you known about it? Have you signed NDAs? Are you participating in trying to rezone to bring data centers in, and you're getting something personally out of this? See, this is what we saw that happened up in Green Charter Township with Goshen. We found out that this Chinese company with developers reached out to all these board members and was offering them exorbitant amounts of money. And they took the deals, they signed NDAs, made these backroom deals without disclosing anything to the community members that they were supposed to be there representing. And so these people need to be asking those questions. What do you know? What have you been offered, if anything? How long has this been going on? And they need to look at zoning requirements, because like what happened up in Kalkaska, they were presented with a proposed data center up there, and nobody wanted it, including the entire board. So what they did was they just did not approve the zoning that would be necessary in this agricultural zoned area, turn it into heavy industrial zoning in order to allow this to come in. And they just refused to rezone. And just like that, it killed the deal. So the more localized an issue is, the more power and control people actually have. And so you need to be talking to your board members and saying, we don't want this here. It's too close to our communities. And so we don't want this zoning change. We don't want ordinances being pushed through. And if it's happening real fast, like what's happening down in Mason, that tells you that there are probably some shady things going on behind the scenes that the board members are not disclosing. So
and the mayor did an interview with a very lazy journalist. I have to say that because when you interview someone and you definitely know what they're saying is not true, you have to push back. It's the job of the journalist. And the Mayor Whipple of Mason literally told this guy, yeah, people are claiming these AI data centers are pollutants. They're not, they don't pollute. And I was like, take the wheel on my phone. I had to put it down because that is not only is that, I don't know if he actually believes that or he's trying to gaslight his community, but that type of leadership is why you need to peacefully and administratively get engaged in your communities, because you need to recall these people who are talking like that, because well, we have no evidence of anything he's promised, but that type of behavior is either pure ignorance or there's something going on. You know, it's a little bit of a red flag.
Which also brings me to another point, because this mayor said, well, I was in HVAC and I did like HVAC engineering. So I'm telling you they're perfectly safe. Well, Kristen and I have been saying from stages, we've been speaking at some of these community gatherings and meetings, these planning and zoning meetings and stuff like that. We've been saying and educating the people, listen, just because an engineer tells you that this system is perfectly great doesn't mean it's safe. It doesn't mean there's no hazards associated as a result of that process. And that's where we talk about the multidisciplinary approach. And this is what's happening. Engineers are telling our legislators, they're telling, board members, this system is perfectly great. We designed a great system. And we say, yep, you did. Your job is to design something that works to give the desired outcome. But then our job is to come in and look at the process and look at the design and say, are there any hazards created or any exposures to either the population, the community, or the environment as a result of this system? See, they're not trained and designed to recognize those things.
Or at the very top of the upside down pyramid of the hierarchy and safety controls is elimination and substitution. And sometimes it has to do with technology or like a technical order for something. We're using this. Is there a better and safer option? You don't just immediately just put that to the side. Those controls, that technology, that formal technological thought has been in place in our profession since the 50s. And that's why you don't have homes that are missing load-bearing walls. I mean, maybe some, but there's a reason that there's people that come and inspect and, licensing. I don't like government control, but sometimes you need to make sure that things are being done correctly, because your failure to do things properly can affect your neighbors and your local community.
Yeah. And we really need global.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we really need global safeguards here.
Right.
We're very freedom-minded, capitalist, pro-capitalism. Right. But at the same time, we do work in the world and the fields of, regulatory compliance. And while we've gotten to be over-regulated, I will definitely agree with that. And so I really like that President Trump has rolled back some redundant and overburdensome regulations that cripple our free market, our, capitalist system. But at the same time, because of what we see in our profession, there do need to be global safeguards. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Right now, there are no safeguards in place with these data centers and these types of facilities. And then the safeguards that are there, like the requirements to do an environmental impact study, are being completely ignored and nobody's calling them out on it. Like what we did in Goshen, So these are the things people need to be educated on and bring as talking points to their communities when they go to their planning or zoning meetings, board meetings, whatever.
My recommendation, Justin, would be the people that really want to get activated, engaged in their local communities, whoever asked that question, I would implore you to just go on YouTube and search AI data center, human and environmental issues. You will see testimonies on there. They're not long clips. You will see testimonies from people that already live near them. Listen to what they've dealt with specifically in their areas, because it's different by state. And then formulate your questions through that and say, hey, I heard this happen here. What safeguards or controls, design controls, are you going to put in place to prevent that happening in my community if this goes through? So that way see, when you're having confrontational conversations with people who automatically think you're against something, if you form it in a question, like you can still air a grievance while asking a question, trust me, it goes a lot longer and they're more susceptible to actually receiving your question.
Yeah. We're going to talk more about these things on the days to come. Somehow I have a feeling this is going to end up being a very big political issue. And I think it should be, in some ways, but also want to make sure that it doesn't end up being something where it gets completely politicized to the point that we aren't able to come together and have these conversations, because I think this is a bipartisan issue. This is something that Democrats and Republicans are probably fortunately concerned about, but there's also Democrats and Republicans maybe together that that don't necessarily see the forest for the trees yet. Here's the headline for the Midwest: that Jocelyn Benson doubles down on support for data centers as husband's company pushes the Saline Township project, which is another example of who knows who's doing what behind the scenes.
Yeah, talk about a conflict of interest. But like what you said, this is the one issue, and I have told several people, I can't remember ever when Americans have been so united across every political spectrum, across every faith or no faith or whatever. I mean, Michiganders do not want these data centers in the manner that they're being proposed and pushed on us. And we've worked with Democrats, independents, liberals, conservatives. It doesn't matter.
When
Nobody
we spoke
wants
in Mason, there was a whole row of people in masks.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of funny because if they knew who we were, they'd be like, but then, and to be dead serious, there's other benefits to us kind of helping with this fight, because we were right about the improper handling and improper controls that were put in place, whether it was this thing or this thing. We were right. So now those same people that probably thought, they're not doctors, they're now understanding more of our profession, how many arenas it touches, and they want our help now. So it's like, if you believe us now, do you understand? None of this is ever political for us. I don't care if Ron Paul himself was promoting these AI data centers. I would still call it out. I mean, for me, I will attack any side of the aisle if we're talking about how other actions are affecting other people.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And I think that America 250 this year. We're celebrating a birthday. We, I think, need to have reasons to come together. And this is one of those reasons that I think a lot of us can find ways to reach across the aisle and stand for things that are important. We're constantly being divided by lots of different reasons and issues, and that's fine. Some of those I can totally see and understand. But this is going to affect, no matter who you vote for, this is going to affect you. And we're all going to have to answer for it, because it's not just Michigan. It's every state in the country. And it's a big story. We'll have to have you guys come back, because after you testify, you're going to testify in a couple of weeks. When you come back in that hearing, maybe there's some more information. As you constantly get more information, we'll talk about it. But I wanted to do this because it's such a big conversation. It's such a big topic. And it's one I think that is going to be one of the biggest this year in 2026 and beyond as we try to navigate this. But I also like the approach, Tammy, as you said, it's not like we're saying no data centers at all. We're saying, hey, if we want to do this, just like anything else, we got to make sure we do it right. And we got to make sure we do it responsibly.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us on. Pay attention to the House Oversight on Tax Subsidies Committee next week, Wednesday, February 4th, 10:30 a.m. to noon. We'll be testifying. You can watch it live there. And then we'll follow up with you. Like, this is very developing, because we agree this is probably one of the biggest talking points in Michigan and going into the midterm elections.
If people want to stay up in touch with you guys, I know that you can't answer every question that comes to you, but like, if people want to just follow what you're putting out and things like that, what's the best way for them to do that individually?
For me, I share the fight and information, and I share material from other people on my page on Facebook, as it's displayed on the screen, Kristen Meghan Kelly. And then on X, it's just Kristen Meghan. TikTok, Kristen Meghan TV. Just if you put in Kristen Meghan, I'll pop up anywhere. And I always try to share my material and the material of others, because that's the good thing about this is the people that we have organized with come from different backgrounds, and we're conveying that multidisciplinary review.
Yeah, Kristen's on all the things. I'm not. I can't keep up with all the things, but I do have my information shared simultaneously to Facebook, You can follow my public figure page at Tammy K, just middle initial K Clark. And it's also then shared to Instagram there. So that's it. So yeah, I don't have time for all the things, but
You can find
follow
me on
there.
MySpace. No.
Right.
Well, that's how you guys are the dynamic duo. You work better together, and we need each other for those things. Kristen and Tammy, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for being in the fight, and we will continue to keep folks updated. It's such an important issue, and it's one that I just don't think if we understand that it's an issue, we don't understand every aspect of it. That's why I went to you guys. I want to understand this stuff better.
And neither do we.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah. We wish
We're
more
definitely
people would come to us instead of just saying things and believing everything they hear.
yeah.
What a world it would be, huh?
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time,
Thank you.
folks. You got questions. Obviously, we'll put show notes and information up in the stack at justinbarclay.com, but stay tuned for more on this as we navigate it together. God bless.